Hey, welcome to video 2 in my series about my experiences with coaching. In the spring of 2022, I hired a coach for myself. It was the first time I'd ever done that. So why did I? Well, I'd left a job that I'd been at for a number of years, and I'd taken about 6 months to kind of decompress, figure out what I wanted to do next. I finally decided I was ready to dive into a job search. But I realized it had been about 15 years since I'd done it the traditional way without being either pulled into something by someone I knew or had already worked with. And boy, did the landscape look different. I also had a little bit of self-awareness, enough to know that some mindset issues were coming up for me. Old stuff that I hadn't dealt with. And suddenly, here I was trying to get a job at a level that was much higher than I'd ever reached for. And that old junk was rearing its ugly head. I knew I needed some support in that area too. And as luck would have it, I came across someone on LinkedIn who was not only a job search coach, but who was a psychologist in her former life. And I thought, bingo, this is the shot in the arm, 2 shots really, that I need. So she and I had an intro session to check for fit, we discussed goals, and then we were off to the races. Unfortunately, it didn't work out so well. Now, the coach is a lovely, sweet person. I found out that growing up, she was very affected by seeing one of her close family members hate their job and suffer through it for years, and that became her motivational why. Unfortunately, her caring nature, which she really is very caring, didn't seem to translate into caring very much about my success. Her coaching business is very much a business. And now don't get me wrong, I totally agree and understand that you need hard-nosed business acumen to make these things work. But when you're dealing with the vulnerable emotions that almost inevitably come up for people during a job search, you've got to be all in on the caring part too. And for me, that balance was lacking. In our sessions, I talked a lot. Surprise, right? But she didn't really offer much in the way of feedback. And there were no new tools shared that I could use to shift my mindset. That theme will be important in my video on Thursday. The majority of the job search advice that I got was centered around the often shared, make a list of companies you want to work for and start networking into them. And that didn't feel like it was advice that was worth the amount of money I paid to get it. The program was supposed to be 3 months, but it ended up dragging out closer to 6. Because there was rarely time available in her calendar for me to schedule our sessions. So what did I learn? Well, I learned to ask a lot more questions. I learned to ask specifics about materials and methodology. I learned that I need to have an agreed on roadmap of goals, but also with a timeline to measure progress. I learned that I need to ask about logistics on things like how appointments would be booked. I learned that for a mindset change, I was going to need someone who challenged me and gave me real tools. I also learned that I would most definitely never again pay for an entire program up front. Now, by the end of the engagement, I actually did end up getting what I thought was my dream job. Spoilers, it ended up not being my dream job, and I quickly resigned. I can't say, though, that the coaching helped me get it because it was already in the pipeline prior. So all in all, the coaching, it wasn't a negative experience, unlike some of the scary stories that I've heard. But it just wasn't positive in terms of time spent and the value for money. And that really felt wasteful and frustrating. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me for another coach story tomorrow.